In a world where truth means nothing.
They're eating the dogs.
In a world where Joe Rogan and John Oliver are hailed as intellectual icons. In a world where Hollywood makes the same shitty movies over and over and over again. From that world comes a team.
Wait, are you talking about me?
In the lineage of iconic teams like The Rock and Mankind.
Okay, well, that's not a terrible team to be part of, I guess.
Like Lennon and McCartney.
Okay, that's probably slightly even better. I could get behind that.
Like Sherlock and Watson, or Batman and Robin.
Okay, but one of those people in that dyad is really bad at what they do.
Like Steven Tyler of Aerosmith and the guitar guy from Aerosmith.
Hey, wait a second. Don't want to be the guitar guy.
Like Michael Jordan and, whoever else was on the Bulls.
I'm Pippen. I'm Scottie fucking Pippen.
Comes a partnership to save you from the shitty entertainment you are forced to consume like so many Slim Jims. It's Connect the Coast Radio and a guy with an LED background, a microphone, and too much free time on his hand wearing emo band shirts like it's the 2005 Warped Tour.
Hey, wait a minute. That's me you're talking about.
This winter, if you watch one podcast, make sure to watch Connect the Conversations.
That's not the name of the podcast, you asshole.
Fine. It's Honest Conversations with Mr. Carter, now syndicated on the Connect the Coast network.
Thanks. See, is it that much to ask for you to be professional for like 10 seconds?
Coming soon.
You motherfucker.
My home that I have finally returned to after 20 years. This is Honest Conversations with Mr. Carter. We've been away for a month. I'm glad to see there's nothing of note in the news to watch. Nothing happened while we were away. There was no major political upset. What? I'm getting word. Oh, a lot of shit. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about some of that tonight. Tonight, my guest is an activist, a podcaster, and a Star Trek nut. And I cannot be more excited to have her on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Amber of The Amber Show on. Amber, welcome to Honest Conversations with Mr. Carter. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
So let's talk about politics right up front. Let's talk about why Star Trek Deep Space Nine is the greatest Star Trek and why you agree with me, and go. So when did you first discover Star Trek? Tell me about that.
First discovered Star Trek. Oh, I can remember exactly when it was. So I was a kid. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but and that's probably a good thing because it would age me. But it was when Next Generation was live on television. And it was the dramatic, cliffhanger of, I think it was season 4, where Picard gets turned into Locutus. And it was like, I don't know why. It must have been like the TV promo or something that had me tune in. And that was when we all had to watch like TV shows live, so it was like an event. And then you had to wait like a whole year for the dramatic conclusion, right? So I really fell in love with that episode. And I don't know what it was about it. Maybe it was like Picard is kind of this this character that's like uncorruptible, right? Until he's met with like a corruptible force that like resistance is futile, right? So I think there was so much drama at maybe that point in my life too, that I was just kind of sucked into it as a teenager. I loved it, and I fell in love with it ever since.
I feel so bad for this generation of kids because they will never understand the pain of to be continued, where you almost want to rush your TV and injure the person who wrote that episode because you're like, I gotta wait how long for this? Like, are you serious?
Yeah, I feel like the writers at Game of Thrones did a really great job of kind of recapturing that frustration when they like broke apart that last season and had you waiting forever between episodes and between, what was it, like 2 years between the last 2 seasons. So I definitely remember that pain too. And the pain of like having to watch it like when it was scheduled to be on, right?
Yeah, you had to like clear your calendar, right? I remember there were times where I would unplug the phone to the house because like I don't want to be in I don't want my mom taking any phone calls during this. I just need to be really focused. And my mom would be like, no calls have come in for a while. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's crazy. I don't know why that happened, Mom.
I mean, like they called it like must see TV on Thursday nights for a reason. Like there were adults that like cleared their calendars on Thursday night because you had like Seinfeld and Friends and whatever else they had in the mix there as well too, right?
And then there was TGIF on ABC,
Oh, yeah.
where we got
Mhm.
Urkel and what was it was Family Matters, and what was the one
Full
that was
House.
Full House. There was another one that
Yeah.
was like the whitest show I've ever seen, and it had
That was like every show back then.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That doesn't really narrow it down, does it? All right, so back to Star Trek. Who was the first character?
Frasier. There you go.
Yep, that's it. Yep, it's the second whitest show ever made.
Yes,
Kelsey
exactly.
Grammer still like might be removing stains from clothing at 100 yards. We don't know.
Probably.
But what's the first Star Trek character that you saw yourself in? Because I think that's also a big thing for Star Trek fans. Is like we see the characters and then we see ourselves in those characters. So what was the first one for you?
That's probably a really easy answer for me. I really like Jerry Ryan's character, Seven of Nine, on Voyager. And it had so much to do with what I was going through at that time as a teenager, trying to understand like gender, transition, all of that. So here you have somebody that was born essentially like Annika Hansen, the character, was born, essentially as a young child, has very few memories at all. And like as she went into puberty, essentially, she was co-opted by this Borg. She was turned into somebody that she wasn't supposed to be, right? And then coming out of that and being kind of rescued, allowing her to discover herself, allowing her to, like really kind of like express herself. Like there's a few episodes where she's, music and singing and trying to figure out who she is dating with the Doctor and everything. And I think that character arc over, I think she was on, 4 of the seasons on Voyager. That character arc over 4 seasons, like just really, really resonated with me. I was really happy to see her come back in Picard as well too, but that was a little bit of a different story. Her character specifically on Voyager.
So, for those who don't know, or maybe watching this as young people who have not watched Star Trek, can you explain what a Borg is? Because I don't think they're going to get that one.
Sure. I mean, like, I guess it's in a way kind of relevant today, right? Like we have the emergence of AI, which is not necessarily like a self-thinking type of AI that we have, but imagine an AI that did go rogue, right? Where the ultimate goal is to achieve perfection. And so, and they arrive at the ultimate goal of perfection is to essentially co-opt, or what they call assimilate people unwillingly into their collective, and then like link themselves all together and take away the individual consciousness and put them into a collective consciousness, a hive mind. I'm really, really nerdy that I was able to explain that well. But anyway.
Listen, for anybody who's watching this episode is like, oh, I wonder how nerdy this is going to get. It's going to get really nerdy.
We're
I'm
talking
asking
politics.
for lots of clarification.
I'm so sorry. No, this is good, right? This is your Star Trek starter right here. So yeah, that's the Borg, and so they travel essentially from planet to planet, destroying civilizations, adding it to their own, because the ultimate goal would be to acquire all civilization, all knowledge, and create this kind of like perfect race of cyborgs. But that also the trade-off of this perfection is losing your individuality.
So for also those of us that were probably young enough to be impressionable by this, the Borg's aesthetic, I think, could best be described as found at a bondage club. Like,
oh my god, yeah, a bondage club, and like the floor of like a mechanic shop, probably.
Yeah, there's a lot of adult overtones in their dress styles, and I for one was really upset when Jerry Ryan stopped dressing like a Borg and they put her in the silver jumpsuit, because I was like, that
was like, I think it was one season. I don't think it was well received by anybody. That's for sure.
No. I was like, bring back the rubber, bring back the clampy hand things. That's all I want, you know? Okay, so you're a young person. You're absorbing Star Trek Voyager. For those of you who don't know Star Trek Voyager, give me the synopsis of that show.
Sure. Let's get even nerdier. So Star Trek Voyager is about this essentially like almost like
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hang on one second. I just had something strange happen. Well, hang on a second. Technical difficulties. Give me 1 sec here.
This isn't awkward at all. Just sitting here and staring out at the audience. I should have something to entertain them. Maybe a joke. Can I tell a joke?
There we go. Well, and I'm back, and I've got audio. Miles O'Brien is somewhere going, that's my guy right there.
Were we muted the whole time, or was everything good?
No, I think it was me. I think my mixing board was just like, absolutely not. You can just put that on pause. And I've been recording. I have a new SD card, and I'm wondering if the SD card was just like, no, I can't continue to write this. So that's fine. So we were on the synopsis of Star Trek Voyager.
Correct. You've got this essentially like unequipped, like luxury starliner, if you will. It's not equipped with the latest weaponry or anything like that. Mysterious force sucks it out of like Earth orbit, like while it's on its like maiden cruise and everything. And it also sucks out this like enemy ship as well too, that like was trying to attack them. And I guess we can get into the politics of the Maquis later. But it essentially sucks these two opposing forces out into the middle of nowhere, like the middle of nowhere. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think they said it was going to take like 80 years to get home at maximum warp.
Which the UPN network was like 80 years of Star Trek. All right,
let's do this. There might be a few wormholes along the way, you know, a few slipstream drives. But so, yeah, they get sucked out to the middle of nowhere. And then it's like, what do you do with these people that like were your enemies, I guess? Not really enemies, but I guess like these people that you've been fighting against, these people that have their cause, you have your cause, and now you're out here in the middle of nowhere, and like the rule of law is kind of broken down. There is no more authority anymore. There's no more government. There's no more anything. Now it's just about kind of that base human like survival, right? And then how do we come together as people that have differing opinions and come together as one unified group and get home? And then one of the other things too that they did, like they established right off the bat, is like, hey, 80 years at maximum warp, none of us are going to be alive, right? So we need to develop allies, friendships, find new technology to help us get home faster, essentially. And so they take the slow road home, which gets them home faster.
So
spoiler alert.
So spoiler, they do get home. There's some awkwardness on that last episode, but we're not going to talk about that right now.
No. I love it though, but yeah.
I love the last episode. I'm just very mad that Chakotay and 7 of 9 never got their moment in the sun, right?
Yeah,
like where I was like, oh, you set this up and then you just yank the rug out from under me.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Okay, so for people who don't know, I think there's like 2 background things, which now in science fiction, this is very commonplace, especially in things like The Expanse, right? Where you have strong female characters. What was so important about Voyager at that time?
Well, I mean, like, we have a female captain at this time. You know, we have a female engineer, chief engineer, who is actually, you know, part of that other group, you know, who is specifically appointed to this place. This ship is essentially like, at that time, right, in the 90s, this ship is a ship of misfits, right? You've got a woman in charge of the ship, which would not be very commonplace at that time period. You have somebody that is playing a Native American role in the second in command on that ship. You have a former prisoner, like a criminal. I forgot what Tom Paris did. I think I always confuse it. Like, he did something in Next Generation that wasn't his character, but then whatever. So anyways, he's in jail. He gets busted out. And so, like, you got him driving the ship, right? You've got this half Klingon, half human, you know, essentially a biracial character who's left in charge, biracial female character who's left in charge of engineering. And then the relationship that's developed, and like that interspecies relationship that's developed between that character and Tom Paris. So there's so many like really kind of like wonderful, like, I guess, glass ceilings that were broken for this show at that time. That's for sure. Even this time period, this would still be like a fairly diverse cast, you know, to have that Native American character in that second in command position. I mean, like, you still don't see a lot of Native American, like, you know, visibility on television.
Yeah, I think the other thing too that always struck me is at that time, if there was, I mean, like my mom jokingly said this the other day. She's like, if it's such a utopian society, why is there a therapist on the bridge? and then she goes,
Because it's a utopian society.
No, but then she goes, yeah, but it's such a utopian society. They had nothing for her to do for 6 seasons. It's not until like season 7 she gets to blow. I'm like, that's actually a point. But also, I think the other thing too is like, when you look up until that moment in science fiction, the depiction of women is predominantly as the sexy member of the crew, and
Nurse Chapel, right?
Yeah.
You know, this I can't control myself, this lusty nurse that can't keep her hands off of, like, you know, Spock or the captain or whoever it might be at that time, right? And so, yes, absolutely. Like, you're going to have that, like, female trope that's being displayed.
And she was sort of the first character, wouldn't you say, that, like, it wasn't, like, it's not the character Janeway didn't have sex appeal, because she did. I mean, was a young guy, you know, I paid attention. But, you know, like, also, it was in the fact that she wasn't portrayed as a sexual object that made her actually an interesting character.
Oh, absolutely. She was gendered female, but there was nothing gendered about the show in that regard, in her regard as Captain C. It felt like they wrote so many of the episodes, it could have been like switched with Picard, right? Like, you could have put the exact same male character in that role and the script would have remained the same. And that was really wonderful at that time, to see a strong female lead in that role as captain. And, you know, not really knowing what was going on with myself at that time, because I didn't really have the vocabulary to define who I was or what transgender was at that time, like, being able to even see a strong female leader, you know, I'm sure had an absolute impact on me.
So tell me what it is about Deep Space Nine that doesn't catch you, because it's such an interesting dynamic between Trek fans, right? Where it's like, I love Voyager, I love this, I love that, and you're like, well, why? So what is it about Deep Space Nine that makes you go, I'm going back to Voyager?
Oh my gosh. So last night after I posted that story, you know, with the Deep Space Nine and the going back and forth, I'd alluded to my partner is a huge fan of Deep Space Nine. Like, she thinks it's the end all and be all of Star Trek. And my thing is I really, really enjoy, never seen Star Trek, but we'll stay ready for a discussion. Good. You're going to get some. So, I mean, with the discussion, it was like, for me, Voyager was like this. It was campy, right? But it was like, for me, it was the ultimate like Star Trek story, right? Like, we are out in the middle of nowhere. We're having to create allies. We're having to do all this type of stuff. It was just like a completely different like Star Trek. Deep Space Nine felt so static for so many years before like the Dominion War. You're stuck on this starship, this spaceship that is just like in like statically in space, except for like a few episodes, and then you had just all sorts of like, I don't know. I enjoyed Star Trek because there weren't too many religious elements in Star Trek. There was a very heavy religious lean in Deep Space Nine. I'm traumatized from the religion that I was in. And so like that kind of turned me off too. These wormhole aliens that are like, that these people worship as gods, and that whole backstory. And so then when they tried to like essentially, I think, turn the story and make it more interesting, the Dominion War for me just like, it really lost the hopefulness that other Star Treks gave me. It was dark, right? It was gritty. You had to go through some uncomfortable truths in a lot of those episodes. You know, everything wasn't what met the eye. I guess I turned to sci-fi for an escape from reality, and that it felt like that was just like projected onto the future, and I guess I want better for our future, right? And so that I think that's why it just didn't appeal to me at all, and it was just really hard to get through those episodes. Plus, Benjamin Sisko, like, he was Commander Will, you know, so there was just so much that just didn't really appeal.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, yeah, I mean, he chews scenery in a lot of those episodes, right? Like, that is an actor who enjoys acting for acting's sake. It's not necessarily what's written on the page. And you know what's crazy is like, that guy has so much range, because then you see him in American History X, and he is such a different character. You're like, why didn't you just, you know, do this? I think Sisko in and of himself was, for me, a fascinating character, a single father who This
Yes.
African American, not portrayed as a dirtbag, but instead as like an idealized character. I do totally get the war side of things. I think having had a father who fought in the Second World War, all those, there was a lot of stuff for me to noodle on there where I was like, what would I have done in that situation, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
and then also, just Andrew Robinson as Elam Garrick. I will watch Andrew Robinson stand next to a pile of bricks.
He was a very redeeming part of the show. I wish, he was always kind of this like side quest, if you will. You were going to him for the information, maybe not necessarily every episode. Gosh, oh man, I wish he had a more central role in the storyline.
He wrote a book while he was doing the last season called A Stitch in Time, and it's Garrick's diary from the last year of the Dominion War. And if you can find a copy of this thing, it goes for like $300, but he just put out the audiobook that he reads as Garrick, reading his own diary. And it's so good. It's so
okay,
good.
I might tune into that one. I would, yeah.
I use one of his lines all the time when I don't want to answer a question, which is Sisko says to Sisko, yeah, I left him with a distinct impression that if he tried to open the door, it would explode. And Sisko looks at him and goes, that is just an impression, right? And he goes, it's important not to dwell on such inert minutia. So if I don't want to answer a question, it's important not to dwell on such inert minutia.
Of course, right? Exactly. I like that. Might pick that one up.
Okay, so we've gone over the really important stuff for politics.
Yes,
we've gone over Star Trek. Talk to me about your political activism. When did that start? How did you find your way in that role, especially, in Ventura? Talk to me about that.
So I think, I'd go back to probably like growing up. I grew up in a very like conservative, like Christian household. And it was really interesting because there was this, like, I took a lot of what like I saw and listened to and heard at church, like very to the heart, right? So for me, like, I don't know, maybe different people hear different things, or maybe I was just more present for certain sermons or whatnot. But there was always this kind of overriding, like, Jesus is love. Love thy neighbor. Love is like the ultimate goal. And so like I really took that to heart. But then I was seeing the people around me that were like very involved in this kind of conservative space, and like that wasn't the objective. And like because I was like on the inside, like there was none of this like quiet part out loud. It was the loud part out loud, right? Everybody like I heard a lot of racist stuff growing up. Like it was transphobic stuff. I mean, like homophobic. It was just everything, right? So it just that probably like really kind of made me take like kind of a hard left turn, because that to me, like I saw like the identification inside that like progressive party as one that's trying to solve like pain in the world, or at least that would be the ultimate goal, like by creating solutions. You look at like things like the deal that Roosevelt did during World War II to stimulate the economy. These types of progressive policies and programs for Social Security, getting people back to work. That is the history that I was learning about. These are the types of things that like got me involved in that. So that was like where my party affiliation was. But as far as like getting politically involved, though, like from an activist standpoint, that's fairly recent. And the way it all happened is I had joined the board for PFLAG, which is an organization. It's one of the oldest LGBTQ organizations in the nation. And I was on their board here locally in Ventura. And so we were trying to kind of put together more events for the LGBTQ community. And one of the very first events that I had the opportunity to host was the Transgender Day of Visibility event. And we did it at Patty's, which is a local gay bar here in Ventura. And it was extremely well attended. And on a whim, I reached out to our city council, just thinking to myself, like, hey, like we're all having a big celebration here, but wouldn't it be really great if the people that are in charge know that we're having a celebration here, see us, and know that like we're here in Ventura, we're a big part of their community. And so just on a whim, I sent it out, and I was so shocked that the mayor of Ventura showed up, that the city council person representing that specific area of Ventura showed up. We had another city council member from a district that didn't even represent that area also show up. So we had like the maximum number of like city officials that you could have there without violating the Brown Act. And they had a great time, and we had them give speeches and everything. And it was what was really interesting at that party, that was one of them pulled me aside and said, hey, you need to keep an eye on things that are going on here in the city. It's really important for somebody from your community to keep an eye on things. And then that was it. And it was just like, it was like this like clandestine message, right? Where it was just like, I wonder what he meant by that. All right, well, whatever. See you later. And I went home. And then it was just a few weeks later where all of a sudden they proposed to ban the pride flag in Ventura. And it was like, oh, I'm glad I was paying a little bit of attention to this. Someone also sent me the policy proposal here in town. And then we started strategizing on like, how can we as a community come together to create a response to this, to let them know that this is not the direction that Ventura should be going in. And we created this like coalition of people from Diversity Collective, Diversity Shines, the Autism Society. I mean, like there were so many nonprofits that showed up for us, and it was just speech after speech after speech. And the room was filled, and I was holding my breath the whole entire time waiting for the opposition to get up and speak on why we should ban the pride flag. There wasn't one person there that did. And so it was just dropped. That's it. It's a dead issue here in Ventura, and that was the end of it. And so through that, though, I made friends with a lot of these city council folks. Yeah, the Church of Duran, that's right. Hey, I'm not here to name names. We're being nice tonight.
Listen, we're not here to name names, but the audience can do whatever it wants. Listen, as their attorney, they have free speech, okay?
That's right. So then, you really kind of get to know these folks that are up there making those decisions. And I started becoming very present at additional city council meetings, speaking on other issues, traveling around to other cities in our county and speaking at those city council meetings as well. And so that's really kind of how the activism like really kicked off. I mean, there was something that drew me in. There was somebody that gave me a heads up on it. And now like, yeah, I'm sucked in.
So I have sort of like two differing questions, because there are people that watch the show that are not in California. How would you describe California politics? Because I think most people just go, it's a sea of deep blue. Everyone's the same in California. And then you get here and you're like,
Well, yeah. And so California, right, is a blue state. Like you can pretty much guarantee that it's always going to vote blue, at least for the time being and for the recent past. Okay. I mean, like,
Lena Hobb is working on it, man. She's down in Orange County buying up everything.
Exactly, right? And we have those pockets of California, right? We have Orange County, we have out in Bakersfield, Fresno, a lot of the Eastern Desert. I mean, like hell, like part of Northern California wants to split off, right? So, I mean, like we have a very, very large state. I mean, like it'd be rough to try to drive north to south in our state in one day. I don't even know if that's really possible, right? And so, I mean, like, it is massive. You have the redwoods up north. You've got San Francisco. You've got this whole area of nothing in between there and Ventura, right? And then from Ventura, you've got Los Angeles. You've got San Diego, Bakersfield, Fresno. You've got the desert, Barstow. So there's so many different, like, not only climates, like weather climates, but like people climates. And we are separated by great distances too in certain circumstances, right? From Santa Barbara to San Francisco. I mean, we've got small towns here and there in between, but it's a pretty massive distance. So because of that, there's a lot of like divergent thinking in different areas. And so while we are a blue state because of just our population in the major city centers, there's a very large portion of the state that would describe themselves as conservative.
And then to sort of follow up on that, so with that sort of background, I think So I am a full believer that most people who consider themselves activists are not doing what you're doing. They're just retweeting something, right? And I think most people would assume then that an activist life is just, I retweeted something and my life went on as normal. But for someone who's actually doing what you're doing, I take it there's been some blowback on some of that, right? Like, has there been heated moments that you found yourself in?
Yes and no. For the most part, people have been really cordial. Even the people that I have been talking about the scandals, the things that like need to be talked about and exposed, that certain city council members are deeply involved in, there's been a civility to it, right? I'm reporting the news. There is reports of this. I'm not making accusations. I'm like reporting the facts that are heard. And so I think that at least here in Ventura, no, there has been no significant blowback towards me, towards my family, or anything like that. And I try to walk a very fine line. I try to be very fair in reporting. We had, if you go back and you take a look at like the city attorney scandal that we had, like It is all fact-based. It is all quote-based, and we have fun with it. Like, one of my big things is I can give you all the facts you want, right? Like the retweet thing, like, is that entertaining, these retweets, these reposts and everything? So for me, activism becomes engaging if you can create a reason for people to engage with it through humor. If we take a look at like how many voters has C-SPAN registered versus the Daily Show, right? And it's because of an engagement, because people are engaged in the Daily Show. We can't find ourselves engaged in C-SPAN, certain people. So
I'll have C-SPAN on all day, be like, wow, this is fascinating. How can they be so stupid?
yeah, for real, right? So I try to kind of create and incorporate that engaging content into the facts, into the quotes, and then let the audience kind of decide among themselves, like, like, where do you land on this issue? I try not to specifically take like a side. I mean, like, some things are very black and white, but there's also a lot of stuff that's like mysterious, right? Like, why did the district attorney make the decision that he made? Like, we don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but here are the facts.
I think there's a lot to unpack there, as my mom would say. So I think there's a couple pieces to that. One is, obviously the last 8 years of American politics, any civility at a national level seems to have just gone out the window.
Yeah.
And yet at a local level, that civility still seems to exist, right? Where it's like, I might not agree with your politics, but I'm not going to scream at you in a grocery store. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are Karens and Kevins everywhere.
Yeah.
But I guess my question for you is, in your opinion, how do we get back to that on a national level where it isn't so fraught with tension, like someone might just decide to start shooting at somebody else?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't even know where we'd begin. I do really believe in certain philosophies, right? Like, focus on changing your corner of the world. And so, like, if we all focused on changing our little corner of the world and tried to make it better, and like collectively it would get better. But is there like a silver bullet? Is there one person that can stand up there and create this civility and like undo the damage that's been done? And just for clarification, when I speak about damage, I'm just talking about like the civility. Like, forget who's responsible for any of this. Like, it's damaged, right? And so like what can heal that damage? Like, I think it's going to be like long-term medicine. Honestly, it's going to require all of us activists, people that don't even identify as activists, like finding one tiny little thing that they could do in their community to try to make the world a little bit of a better place. And collectively that would work, but it would require everyone doing it.
Spoken like a true Voyager fan. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
so
right?
the Deep Space Nine fan of me is like, but when do the Cardassians come back and enslave everybody?
Oh gosh, if the Kardashians could just enslave me, let's do it.
I will take the hit for the team and live in their mansion.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I know we were all worried about who was going to take that one on. My wife, she'll be okay with it. I'll just smurf some money that they've got laying around.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they will pay for it.
So I think the other thing that's very interesting about your activism is that it's very personal, right? And I imagine for some people their activism is, although again, I think we live in this new age of influencer activism where it's not personal, it's all about attention and how to exercise the attention economy.
Right.
What is it about? So I guess there's also, let me back up a second. There's something that you said where it's like there are certain things that are just not political, and I think this is where you and I probably overlap more than anything. Someone's existence is not political to me. Someone's right to manage their body or their life is not political to me. That's correct. If anything, it's a legal question, and then when it comes to the law, I'm very much on the side of the law's job is to create liberty, not to take it away. Right.
Correct. And yes.
I guess my question is like, what is it about and I'm putting this in big air quotes, the politics of trans liberation that people don't seem to understand, that are on that other side of the aisle, the people that are like, that think that it's their life or that it matters to them at all. Like, what is it that they don't get?
Well, I think that it's not necessarily that they don't get something. It's that they've never been given the opportunity to get that something, right? Mm-hmm. You look at like me. I live here in Southern California. I got all the hormones that I could possibly need. Just fill out a form, change my name, down to the DMV, $15, get a new driver's license. I mean, like, there is zero friction for the most part in California in being transgender and getting the care that you want or need. It's fully covered under our Medi-Cal program. All private insurance is required to carry transgender health care. So in California, it's just very easy to be me, right? But now in Texas, you can't change well, you could have a court order from a judge saying, like, this person is transgender, change your name, and you can bring that to the DPS in Texas, and they're going to say, sorry, we have a policy of not changing names. It doesn't matter what the court order tells us to do. So there's like this stalemate right now between, like, and this isn't even legislative. This is just the attorney general there. So it's the executive branch essentially calling the shots and, like, going toe to toe with the judicial branch in Texas. And so because of that, like, if you can't change your driver's license, if you're going to, be hyper feminine, but your name is Bob Smith and it says male on your driver's license, you're going to be afraid to go to the club. You're going to be afraid to go to the airport. You're going to be afraid to go any place where you're going to have to identify yourself and give yourself away, because that's not safe. So because of that, you're going to hide more. Maybe you're not going to present as the feminine version of yourself that you are. Maybe you're just going to try to avoid all those places. And when you avoid those places, people don't have the opportunity to see you, to get to know you, to see that you are a human being just like them, just like their redheaded kid, just like their left-handed daughter. Like we all have nuances, we all have differences. And even, like, at one point in time, I used, I compare it now, like, transgender in my world used to be a noun. Now transgender is an adjective. Transgender is just a way to describe a part of me. And so what's happened is because you have all of these transgender people that are literally afraid to come out of their homes, literally afraid to even tell their own family members who they are, it's very easy for other people to other them, right? And so it's like, it's that demonization, right? It's the immigrants, it's the, they're going to take your black job, it's the, they're pedophiles, they're going to forcibly transition and convert children. We saw the same thing with, like, the gay scare, the lesbian scare. Like, it's just this, like, creation of an othering. How about, like, everything that happened in, like, the Holocaust and World War II? It's this othering of people. And when you can other people and take away their humanity, well, we've seen what's possible and what's capable at that point. So I don't think that it's necessarily at all the people of America that don't understand the policy or politics of being transgender or what it means to live a trans existence. I think that these people just have never had the opportunity to truly get to know a transgender person, their family, their wife, their children, how I take them to school every single day, how I raise them here in this household, how we read stories together at night, right? They don't get to see that. All they get to hear is the stories, right? The sensationalism and everything. So I think that's probably the biggest problem. And we see that turning, right? As more people are exposed to transgender people, because more of us are coming out of the closet, more of us are stepping out of the house. I'm at city council talking. You can see me on a broader scale now. All of a sudden, somebody can now say, I know a transgender person. They're not that bad. In fact, they're really cool people. In fact, they try really hard in our community. And when that starts to happen, then all of a sudden you start to see the hearts and minds of people changing. I have yet, and I travel across the country, I've yet to meet somebody where I've met with them one-on-one, where I wasn't able to have a civil conversation with them.
More to unpack there. So, yeah, I mean, I agree. And just to give people an idea, like, statistically, what is the actual population of trans people in our society? It's not enormous either.
No, not at all. I mean, like, it's enormous from a number perspective when you really think about it, but from a percentage perspective, it seems really small, right? Like 1% of all people identify as transgender. And there have been studies done too, where we take a look at these people that are, because right now, like, we don't have a blood test for gay, lesbian, transgender, nothing like that, right? We don't have any types of tests. But what they did do is they know that there's a biological component to being transgender, right? If I were to give you a cis male, cis being you are comfortable inside the body that you were born in. If I were to give you estrogen, you would have problems with your libido. You would start to feel very depressed because you have more testosterone receptors inside your body, and the estrogen would just mess with that. That is not your ideal mix of fuel, right? I've been living my whole entire life with the wrong mix of fuel. As soon as I did get the estrogen, as soon as I did get the dosage that I need, my testosterone crashed. Oh my goodness, I can think clearly. I have libido now. I'm excited for life. Like, that shouldn't be happening if I have a male body. So we know there's a biological component to it. And when they've done these kind of like mass cohort studies where they took a look at the genomes of these self-reported transgender people, they find that there isn't one gene for transgender. There's multiple ones that are turned on and off. And in the ones that I did identify it, you saw across the board these same genes lit up, and it does account for about 1 to 1.5% of the overall population when you look at it at a large number. But when you look at it in like a city like Ventura, like 100,000 people, there's 1,000 trans people just in the city of Ventura alone. I mean, that's a large number of people, right? 1,000 people. Think about that then on a county level or on a city of Los Angeles. How many people in the city of Los Angeles?
I think there is about 5.5 million.
5.5 million. So like 1% of that. I mean, like, what are you looking at then? Like 55,000 then at that point, right? Like, that's a lot of people. Like, a lot of people that are trans just in the city of Los Angeles.
So knowing that we're together on the point of like, universally treat people with fucking respect. I don't know. Like, I've never understood people that are just like, this is where we had this joke. We had this thing the other day. Like, my favorite, I am not a progressive. I would never define myself as one. I may be one, but I would just never want to use that because I avoid populism like the plague. But Tim Walz is just mind your own business. Is like the most progressive thing. It's like, that's a political thing I could get behind. Mind your own damn business. But
it's so simple. Like, if you can't get behind the love message, right? If you can't like love thy neighbor, then mind your own business from your neighbor. Like that's fine. Like, nobody needs you to love thy neighbor, but just mind your own business then, right?
Yeah, if you can't do good, just don't do anything,
Thank you. Yes, exactly. So, yeah.
So what would you say to people? Because I think that like we're at this really weird inflection point, right? Which is like, I grew up in a household where identity politics was like very clearly told to me as a casino that only white supremacists can win in. And then somewhere, probably about 9 or 10 years ago, someone was like, you know what we ought to do? Let's try identity politics. And I, as a person, was like, well, I know how this is going to end. And now 2020 was sort of what I would call like peak identity politics in this country, where it's like everyone was having a conversation about what identity meant. And there was terms like intersectional and all of these, really complicated conversations. And I think, what would you say to people though who say that like, when we have conversations that are based solely on identity, we miss the universalism? Do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, I think that there's a shared space for identity in universalism, because if you look at the universe as a whole, right, we're looking at a very diverse place that's full of different planets, different alignments of stars. Things don't look the same. Planets are different colors. Like, the universe in and of itself is just a myriad of diversity, right? And so we don't need the universe to be homogenized. We don't need Mars to identify as Jupiter, to identify as Saturn, right? And so, but
no, I'm just kidding.
and it really can. But for the rest of us, then, like, we are all unique and individual as well. And a lot of us wear our uniqueness like exteriorly, and we can't change it, right? Like, we're white, some people are black, like, and that's not identity per se, but like, those are things that like are immutable about us. So then it's like there's also immutable parts of us that are on the inside too. And those things, like, we can give it a label like identity, right? And then we can call it identity politics. But like, internally, like, my identity as a transgender woman is just as immutable as, I would say the blonde hair on my head, but it's obviously a dye job. The brown hair on your head, right? And so, like, or the white of my skin, like, there's some immutable qualities about us. And so then this goes back to that kind of othering conversation, right? Where it's like, it's like, oh, we can make this internal part of people an othering thing so that we can demonize it, so that we can put it in a corner and say, oh, this is something that is different about people that we can now discriminate against. And, and if you're willing to deny that part of yourself, then you can be part of our group. It would be hard to do that if it was like, well, we do it with race, right? I mean, like, blacks over here, whites over here. We've done it with religion. We've done it with so many different things. And so like, this is just kind of like another version of that control structure, right? Like of like othering a certain immutable part of ourselves and then creating some type of like club around it, or identity politics, if you will.
Yeah, I also think, for me personally, when we talk about universalism, I just think there's universal goods, right? Like there are, like what is good for you is going to be good for me. It is never like, this is what drives me nuts about this. And I'm going to go on a rant here, so feel free to stop me. But, I just don't understand.
Please. I've been doing so much talking.
Yeah, just take that other person's rights. I'm sure that won't come back to bite me in the ass. And you're like, are you dumb? Like, of course, if you take somebody else's rights, then eventually someone's going to want to take one of yours. And it's like, these same people are like, well, you can't take my guns. That's a right. Like that's an object. Yeah. That's not even party. What are you talking about? Like, I don't even want to take your guns.
One of the best places to look for these examples is on Reddit. There's a subreddit called Leopards Ate My Face. I don't know if you've ever been in there, but it's
I'm sorry. Leopards ate my face. Okay, well, yes. We all know what I'm doing after the show.
You need to, because it is absolutely hilarious. Because it's like, for instance, like it's all about the Leopards Ate My Face party, political party, where you join the Leopards Ate My Face political party, and then you're really shocked when the leopard eats your face, right? And so that's the whole point of it. And so it's all these essentially like people pointing out the hypocrisy of, let's say, somebody who has been voting their entire life and has a lot of evidence online of their support for, like removing abortion, as an option for women. And then all of a sudden they're online complaining about like, their daughter getting raped and not having, abortion care for themselves. And so it's like, there's so many examples of it's like yes for thee, but not for me type of bullshit. Right. And so, so that I see a lot of, and that is a little bit humorous to me, but like you definitely got to check out the Leopards Ate My Face party on Reddit. That's for sure.
It reminds me of a joke me and my friends had. We'd be like, yeah, we would be in politics, but we'd be the people who hate other people party. We'd have meetings, but fuck those guys. They're terrible, like. I guess my other question too is like, do you see some of that othering starting to creep into spaces that are projecting, I don't know, like that face of diversity, right? Because I see it all the time where it's like human beings can only, sub-segment so much before their brain just turns to mush. And like, do you see that? And how do we get past that hump, in your opinion?
You know what? I don't, again, I'm full of non-answers for you, right? I don't know the answer to that question, but like my community, the LGBTQ community, is certainly not immune to this, right? Like I can immediately think of like, I've had Black friends before that have talked about, like Black enough, right? Darker skin. Like there's like microaggressions and like full on blatant racism in so many like communities where you'd think it's like, oh, this community would be banding together, right, to support all members of their community. But yet we're able to be like, well, they're not completely Black, or they're not completely Indian, right? Or they're not completely this or that, right? And so because of that, like you have these things going on. And yes, I do see it in the LGBTQ community, but I see it on two different sides. It's really interesting. So I see, there's a group of folks that are like, this should be LGB, and the T shouldn't be involved in this, right? Because one's about sexuality and one's about gender, and and it shouldn't be mixed, right? So you've got that group of folks. But then you've also got these like trans folks too, that I can see from my own community. The next big fight is going to be in the non-binary space. Like you can already see that kind of brewing, right? Like once trans people have secured like their right to exist as trans people, like it's already happening. Like the binary system itself is then going to be challenged. And so then you have people like myself who do identify strictly as binary, transgender, feminine. And so like I can understand like the non-binary people that are like, hey, you're muddying the waters. We're trying to be like, we're just trying to get this whole trans thing down, like knock it off with all this non-binary stuff, this gender fluid stuff. And so you see that in this space as well too. And that'll be the next kind of bridge that we need to cross in the LGBT community as more non-binary, more.
Oh, looks like we lost her. Uh-oh. I was really enjoying that answer. Hang on. Looks like we lost our guest. Oh no. All right. Well, we'll wait for Amber to come back. I am certain she will. Yeah. I mean, I think that answer is a phenomenally insightful one, and one that from the outside of that community I would have no insight on. But it is fascinating. It does often, I think. You're back. And our guest is back. Let's get a big round of applause. We made it. Right. That was the fastest boot and comeback I've ever seen. I was just saying that like your answer was super, super insightful, because as someone who's on the outside of that community, oftentimes by choice, I just sort of like would have no insight into that. It feels very much like kicking the gangplank as you're getting off the boat. Like, fuck those people. Those are, like, those are the worst people on that boat. But you just came off that boat.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't understand it at all. And, I am lucky. My wife identifies as a gender fluid person. And so as I've gone through my transition, it's allowed her to explore her own gender identity, and kind of have this like parallel path. And while my wife is not a person that's like considering like any type of like gender change or anything, like there is, if you really got to know my wife, you'd see there is a very strong masculine side to this like feminine exterior, right? And so like I've been lucky because I've been given the opportunity to get to know the complexities of a person that is like this, and to be able to understand and then pass on that knowledge. But again, I think it's going to take these people stepping out into the spotlight and demanding like an end to this like very rigid binary structure that we have in like, the world, the United States, locally. And like, that's really going to kind of like continue to move the needle in the right direction, I think.
So one of the things I think is really interesting, and I think you would have incredible insight, so I'm going to ask this question. What we're seeing right now in terms of politics in this country is this huge split between the genders, right? We have women, like 9 out of 10 of them are going to vote Democrat, and young men specifically, not men my age, because I'm no longer young, but like they at least 2/3 of them are likely to vote not conservative but MAGA. And the understanding principle there is that they're tired of being told that they're toxic. They're tired of sort of the shame game being thrown at them. And like, how do we get guys to recognize that like, A, you're not your behavior, right? You can just be more than you are. And B, how do we pull them back into a more normalized space? Because like as an older guy, like I'm terrified of young men. Like I'm just like, y'all are violent as fuck. Stay over there.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is opportunity. I think is one of the biggest things, because what's the axe to grind, right? The axe to grind is that like, I'm sick of being called toxic. I'm sick of these shit jobs. My parents had the ability to buy a house. I can't even like take a trip outside of my city. I'm trying to make ends meet, right? Like back in the day, like, I mean, even I can remember as a kid, I feel like maybe the last generation where it was like, you could have like an afternoon job, like a few days a week, and have enough money to last you like all weekend, and you had a blast for yourself, right? And so essentially you've created this generation of disgruntled young men because there isn't enough to do. There isn't enough opportunity there. You've got a lot of very wealthy, very influential people pulling the strings and setting up the stage, and it can feel a little bit hopeless at times, right? And so then all of a sudden you have this kind of strong man that comes to the forefront and just like hears your grievances and wants to, help you make things better. Whether or not he will, they don't care. They're not paying attention. But the old system like has failed everyone, right? And especially young men that they want to go out there. They want to be the breadwinners of a family. Like they want to provide, but yet like our society doesn't allow for men to really provide for them, for their family, or the men it does allow to provide for their family, that group, that percentage is shrinking smaller and smaller as more of that wealth is collected into that percentage.
I think, tell me what your thought is on this. I also think that part of it is the redefining of the gender roles, right? Like I say it all the time, like if I can be a stay-at-home husband, my wife and I actually have a number that she has to be making, and I can be a stay-at-home husband, like that's not working, right? Like that's not you. If you're
Right.
taking the kids to school and you're contributing, that is not work. And I wonder sometimes
Right.
if men understanding that like what women have traditionally done right in this country is one of the hardest things in the world to do successfully, because there are so many people who fail at it. And I wonder how we sell that idea on a mass scale. I wonder if that would pull more men back, because it's like you are competing for those same jobs in a way that you weren't doing 60 years ago, but guess what, you're not entitled to that job that you want that makes $1 million. Like she's absolutely entitled to it if she's better qualified for it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I don't know how we sell that off to the men of America. I think that I think what we need to do is we need to have more programs in place for folks. I think that we need to, we need to have some type of a works program. We need to have some type of thing that helps people get back to work, get more money in their pockets so that they can take care of them. Screw the gender roles. You want to stay home? Then great. Let's give the women the opportunity to, actually support their families as well too. While we are narrowing the gender pay gap, it still exists. But let's just say there was no gender pay gap. A woman couldn't at this point in time just go out and get a job and support her whole entire family on one job, make it home, have dinner every single night. Forget gender roles. At this point, in most households, people, both parents are working 2 jobs, or God forbid you're a single parent, right? You are having to sometimes work 2 jobs, or you have side hustles to make ends meet, just to support your own children. I can remember when I was a kid, you could have a middle class job and you could expect to take your family on vacation once a year, right? Now, the dream of taking your family on vacation, no. We'll do that free museum down the street,
Yeah, I might have a slightly different experience growing in LA. Everybody has a side hustle. That is expected. It's super funny. I got back here and I immediately started my side hustle, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. It is in the DNA. It is actually put in. But yeah, I get where you're coming from, where it's and I guess, is it just, sometimes I wonder if it's just a logistical problem, right? We just haven't figured out land management in this country, because 80% of the country has nobody in it, right? And we can't seem to build enough houses.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's so much politics that's involved in housing and real estate development. And again, you have these people, I'll give you a perfect example that nobody really would think of, right? So our Ventura City Council, the salary for a Ventura City Council member is $600 a month. That's it. And so if you're being paid $600 a month, and you know what, there's some people that are good, those politicians don't deserve a dime, right? Well, when you do that though, and you have $600 a month, does that mean that I can run for city council? No, fuck no, I can't run for city council. I can't help to make those decisions up there. I have a 9-to-5 job. I can't be doing that. If it was a job that actually paid money, sure, then I could. So then who is up there going to be making the decisions? Well, the people that are very wealthy, or the people that are retired, so of an older generation. And so that is essentially what you see in a lot of these city councils, right? You have land developers, people that own giant corporations or businesses, and then they have the free time and the financial resources to be able to make all the decisions that will benefit them, in town. So for instance, at our last city council meeting, they just voted down tenant protections here in Ventura. Why? Because the majority of our city council's in bed with, commercial land developers. And so that's a very easy one, right? And so well, who could change that? Well, the little people could run for election then. Well, how are they going to survive if they run for election? It's a $600 a month salary. And then what, are you going to go get a job while you're on the city council? Well, thanks for paying attention to our city,
Yeah, I think it's one
I
of
have
the things
opinions.
that makes Trump so unintentionally funny to me is that
Huh.
he isn't successful. He doesn't
No.
actually have the resources, which is why and so his whole pitch is I have fucked everything up my entire life. Please send me $50 because I'm fucking broke also, right?
And
And
it's criminal, right? Because the people that he's getting that $50 from, like, they need it more than anybody there in the middle of the country. You look at a lot of his supporters, the people that are showing up to rallies. Like, these are not millionaires that are showing up to his rallies. These are not millionaires that are cutting the check. And so it's criminal in a way because, again, it's a wealth transfer from the people that need it most to the people that need it the least, to like create these like horrible policies that are going to continue to reinforce exactly what is continuing to happen.
yeah, I mean, I think the thing that really, yeah, and podcast done. No,
Yeah, there
I
we
think
go.
the thing that made me the saddest was the guy that got killed at his rally was a firefighter, right? Like, of course, it
Yeah,
hits someone who literally runs into burning buildings to save other people. Of course, it did. Like, that's just the
yeah,
universe all over. There's the Deep Space Nine fan in me again.
yeah, exactly. And then like it's just so crazy because the way that like Trump like treated the family and everything like that afterwards, like no phone call, no nothing. The family declined the phone call from Biden, and I get that they're conservatives and everything, but like, wouldn't you think that they were all of a sudden then the response of normal, rational people that was like, hey, somebody just took a bullet and died for you, like a family man, a fireman just took a bullet and died for you. Like, the way that you behaved and handled this situation, forget it. You're not our guy anymore. No, this is like the person who they're like, this is the best person that could possibly represent us. And that just blows my mind. Like, I don't even know how to like really square that up.
I don't think it can be. I mean, like you were talking about earlier. It's just if you create enough fear in a room, right, you can get people
Yeah.
to do almost anything. And I think that the one thing
Yeah.
you can give that man is he is real good at making people afraid. And
Yeah.
he's got also a big microphone through Fox News that lets him do it for free, right? Like any other
Yeah.
presidential candidate who wasn't pitching the most extreme ideas would not have Fox News on board, and they would have to pay to get that time.
Well, and that's another thing too, is like, to be honest with you, one of my biggest inspirations for the Amber Show was Fox News, to be honest with you. Because if you take a look at like who is more powerful at like creating and facilitating change, like it's an actual news network. Like Fox News has more of an ability to control the outcome of an election, or at least sway who a candidate might be from a certain political party, than probably the political party and the apparatus itself, right? Like Mitch McConnell probably wanted things to go one way. Fox News wanted them to go another. Who won? Right? And Mitch McConnell is a very skilled politician that has been doing this for years. And so one of the things on the Amber Show, it's like, I have people coming up to me. I have people being like, I would love to see the very first transgender person on the Ventura City Council. I'm like, great, I'll help you find her. Because I don't think that the power lies in having power. The power lies in being able to influence people. And so I like to believe that my intentions are true enough, right? Are pure enough. And so I truly believe that there is power in informing the masses. And I guess maybe, who knows, maybe I'm an idiot, but I just have a feeling if people knew more of the facts about what was going on, the true facts about what was going on around them, they might make some different decisions.
Yeah, it's Sanctus actually from Connect the Coast just posted. Yeah, and some people are actually that hateful, and we don't ever account for that. And you're like, yeah, I think that's the problem.
No, it's true.
It's rational people have a hard time understanding how irrational people can be that irrational. So for sure that.
And and that's actually a really good point, and I talk about that a little bit with folks, is that like those are the people that I'm absolutely not talking to, like, at all. Like, I know I'm never going to get through to those people. Like, I always say, you can't build a house of logic on an illogical foundation. And so if you're going to operate from a hateful foundation, if you're going to operate from an irrational foundation or an illogical foundation, like, I can't build a conversation on top of that. And so we're not going to have that conversation. If we're that far apart, those are not the people that I'm talking to. The people that I'm talking to are the people that are just susceptible to the noise on the other side. We need to have more counter noise on our side.
Lots to unpack there too. As Spock would say, insufficient facts invites danger, right? And I think that's
Yes.
certainly we're gonna try and make everything full circle Star Trek in this episode. Y'all in the audience are just gonna have to get used to it. I think that there is. I worry about the counter noise personally, right? And I actually, this is where I got off. I used to think of myself as very left leaning, and now I think of myself as a classic, probably neoliberal. Like I value school, I value art and literature and all those things. I value Western society and the things that Western society has created, which are things like voting and all the things that we didn't exist before the Greeks, really. Also, really bad art. No, voting as in democracy.
Voting. Oh, I was going to be like, we didn't do voting before?
No voting before the Greeks. Not at all. No, never mind those pictures. Never mind them. Those are the fake news, tremendously bad news. I've never been on a boat, neither Epstein's boat or anybody else's boat.
That's a really good impression.
Listen, I've had I got
scared. There was a little bit of fear all of a sudden that got struck in me. I was like, wait, what's going on here?
My dad grew up in the 1920s and 30s listening to Hitler on the radio in England, and he did a crazy good Hitler impression. So my feeling is that I just get to do the Trump impression, like that's just mine.
Right.
But
that is both a blessing and a curse that your family has there.
Yeah.
Then is,
we got the dictator
impression.
Don't ask me to do a Barack impression. I got nothing. I guess I worry about the counter noise, right? Because what I saw was Republicans take leave of their senses during Barack Obama and literally just fabricate things that weren't happening, right? Like, that's the whole Tea Party. Is like we literally fabricated a problem that didn't exist and then created a movement around that noise. And the one thing you can say for conservatives, they vote as a bloc, right? Like they actually... Not right now. They seem to be having a really hard time with that, which, knock on wood, keeps on being the case. But
it has flip flopped a little bit. To your point. Like I don't think I've ever seen the Democrats come together like they did, obviously, for the Kamala nomination and everything. And that I thought I would have put money on a floor fight, right? I would have put money on a fractured Democratic Party, this, that, and everything. So it is surprising to see the parties kind of like, I guess, taking on their opposite identity, if you will.
Wasn't it Ralph Waldo Emerson who said, "I am not part of any organized political group. I, sir, am a Democrat."
Yes.
But at what point do we actually get into the point, and I've been seeing more and more of this recently, where people who within our sphere are against Kamala Harris because she was a prosecutor, because whatever her opinions about other world issues are manufacturing things that do not exist, that are not true. And it's that noise. Like, how long until we fall victim to that same thing, and then the average person just creates another center party where nothing changes? Like, do you think that that's a possibility?
I definitely could see some type of like splintering or fracturing of the party, creating a third party. What prevents that from happening, though, is the fact that, like, essentially we're in a 50-50 stalemate. So if one party were to fracture, splinter off into another party, you could then essentially have the same type of party politics. Yes, you would have like, I'm going to vote for the MAGA, the Tea Party, the Republican, whatever they might call themselves, and split off into. But you're still going to be up against this other like 50% Democrat bloc. So then like it really wouldn't work in the electoral system that we have for a party to do that. You'd essentially be shooting yourself in the foot. Like we've essentially set ourselves up for a two-party system for life unless we adopt some type of new parliamentary method where you can build coalitions and create governments and like appoint a prime minister and all that nonsense, right? So like we're kind of stuck in the situation that we're in, and I don't really see anybody having like the gumption to be able to like rewrite our constitution anytime in the near future. So I think that that's really going to kind of like hold us into this two-party system. They may change names, they may evolve, they've always done that, right? But I think that we're pretty locked into this at this point.
I was watching an episode of The Simpsons from 1994 the other day, and it's the Treehouse of Horror episode where Bill Clinton and Bob Dole end up in tubes in Kang and Konos' ship, and Kang and Konos assume their identities, and then at one point the guy, like, they get exposed as these horrible space creatures that are trying to enslave humanity, and he's like, "We can all vote third party." And he goes, "Yeah, great. Throw away your vote then." And then you see Ross Perot in the crowd, and he just punches a hole in his head. He's like, "God damn it," And like,
there you go.
Absolutely. I also think that the problem too is that we haven't had a serious third party candidate. Like Jill Stein is a joke. Cornel West still owes his child support. I believe he's actually under criminal indictment for that. You know, RFK is burying bear corpses in New York. He's got worms in his brain. Like if we had a serious option, we might go. And Andrew Yang has no ideas. None. Has no ideas.
No, and we have seen it through history, right? Like you've had like, and while it didn't like pan out like long term, you had like, you know, the Bull Moose Party, right, with Theodore Roosevelt, and he was an independent third party candidate for a while due to his disagreements with politics. You also have people like Jesse Ventura, right, up in Minnesota, who ran on a third party ticket. So there are examples, probably more so locally, right, or like maybe regionally, of like third party candidates kind of shaking it up. But you're right, you would need a really strong third party candidate to make that happen. Now that can happen regionally, it can happen locally because of the money that's involved in it. But when you look at like the actual primary system, the complications of like the different like primary rules and laws and everything in each of the individual 50 states, getting yourself on all of those ballots, I mean, like the war chests of money that are involved with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, like you would have to have like a multi-year effort to build an organization that could compete at this level with the two-party system. So I think that is really, really kind of what holds anybody back. You can't just show up on the stage and be like, I'm a great personality, I'm running independent, please vote for me. Like that's not going to work, right? But it might work at the local level.
And he's gone. You know?
Yeah. I mean, like, and that, yeah, exactly. And like, we've seen that, right? Like, has there been any third party candidate at any point in time that's captured more than like maybe 1% of the national popular vote, right? Like, no.
I think Perot got up to like 1.5% his first time. The second time he didn't get even that, right?
Right. I mean, like, and that's nothing. That is absolutely nothing. And think about, I'm sure we could look up the number. I'm sure it was a sick amount of money that Ross Perot threw at that problem, right? And you get 1% of the vote.
The other part about Ross Perot,
he could have found a better candidate, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about Ross Perot is like, I mean, we'll talk about laying the groundwork for Trump because I'm old enough to remember Ross Perot. Ross Perot would say the weirdest fucking shit. He would just be like, the Republicans are putting chlamydia in my sandwiches. Don't build a barn without two porcupines in the scrotum.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, was Ross Perot running at the time where Al Gore was running as well too?
Yeah, he was Clinton. He ran against Clinton the first time and the second time. And so it would have been first time was Bush, Clinton, and then the second one was Dole, Clinton.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. We had all sorts of people saying dumb stuff back then, so but Ross Perot definitely was the loudest of the idiots. That's for sure.
So, okay. I think the other question would be, you know, how much can you ask people to lose before they leave a party? Because like that's sort of the great example with Ross Perot. Like how often can you lose? And I think that's what happens to every third party group, right? Is like they start losing enough. Right. Except for Jill Stein, she never seems to get tired of it. I don't understand, but she's like, let's lose
something
more.
Going on there.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a lot of thoughts. None of them appropriate for air, but I will save those for later. But yeah, I mean, do we think that like eventually some billionaire is going to be like, listen, I want to keep making money? Like, because that would be the person who I think could finance a group like that. Is someone like a Jeff Bezos, like, I want to continue making money, and these guys are getting in the way of me making money. I need a third party.
I mean, like Elon's tried to buy himself in, right? I mean, like, and it's worked out okay for him. I mean, like, you don't necessarily need to. That'd be another thing too, right? Like you're going to use all of your financial resources and create this like third party that's going to compete against a party that already like wants to prop you up, wants to give you access to their money and say, hey, come along for the ride, we'll take care of you. Like, I think there would have to be an extreme set of circumstances for a billionaire in our country not to align themselves with one party or the other that benefits them more, and then use their financial resources to be able to move forward and do the things that they want to do. There's so much pay for play that's involved there, and going at it alone, going at it by yourself, like you might not live to see the payoff for that, you know? It's much easier just to buy a race now than to buy a race later.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the Koch brothers' actual network slogan? Just buy a race now, buy a race later. You know,
exactly. Buy all the races.
Listen, if we learned anything from Reagan, and we didn't, It is absolutely give money to both sides of any war, because that way, when whoever loses, you come out the winner, right?
Absolutely. Yes. If you're just constantly selling arms into that race, I mean, like, yeah, you're always the winner in that regard, you know?
How long do you think? I mean, this is sort of like a more science fiction based question, but I watched
Sure.
Westworld and I was fascinated and I know people were like, by the third season it's unbearable, and that is true. By the third season, it is almost unbearable to watch. But they introduce what's his name from Breaking Bad. He's always Jesse Pinkman to me, but they introduce his character, and he's living in a technocracy, right, where everybody's sort
Okay.
of life is applied via these sort of social media algorithms as to what you're going to do. And I
Okay.
guess, do we think that like there's a technological solution to some of these gaps where we're seeing them in society? Like, is 3D printing houses the solution or something?
Yeah, I think that we've seen this like just time and time again, right? Like you look at like the Gutenberg press, right? Like giving the ability for the masses to be able to receive information in the printed word, read it, disseminate information that changed the world, right? The connection of the telephone, the telegraph. You have all these like major leaps in communication and ability to communicate that start to progressively change the world. They start to bridge people together. They start to connect people. Now we have social media. There's dangers obviously to all of these benefits, right? Because once you have printed media, now you can distribute propaganda as well too. Once you have like a telephone, you can make a bad phone call as easily as you can make a good phone call. And with social media, we see the exact same
We're
thing.
looking at you,
It allows
Ventura
us.
Tide Pod, on a bad phone call. We're looking at you, Ventura Tide Pod.
See, that's an abuse of technology right there. And so you have say like social media, we see the same thing, right? Like misinformation on social media, but also an ability for me to have a platform to introduce more people to transgender people and to start to turn the narrative on that. So I think that like yes, the technological component is extremely important because it will continue to bridge gaps in things like disability, inability to understand other people, inability to see other people, speak to other people. There's so much of a language barrier and then a mistrust because of a language barrier. Imagine if we did live in this Star Trek world where my communicator badge automatically allowed me to translate here something somebody from another language was saying. All of a sudden, we might be able to pick up on nuances better. If the AI could even translate like certain like regional colloquialisms, right, into something that I could understand. Now I can understand not only what they are saying, but what they mean behind what they are saying. And it'll give us a greater opportunity to understand each other. And so while there are so many people that are against, AI or moving forward technologically, if applied in the right way, like, you have the destructive power of the nuclear bomb, you have the clean energy opportunity of nuclear fission, right? And so like those are like that's an extreme example of like the polarizing power of a good technology versus bad technology. And so, or just an agnostic technology that can be used good or bad, right? And so social media, all of these types of connections, as we move into this augmented reality world, virtual reality world, give people the ability. I mean, like we can't teleport to China right now, but I could put on an Apple Vision Pro and I could FaceTime somebody and see a 3D representation of their body. Now all of a sudden I feel more connected to that person who I can't speak their language. I don't know their customs. I've never been to their home, but now here they are front and center, and it's tricking my brain into creating this like parasocial relationship with them. And it's now bringing the cultures closer together and people that may have never had an opportunity to be that close. So I think that, yes, I think technology is absolutely going to solve more and more problems as it also creates more and more problems as well.
Yeah, I mean, you always take the good with the bad, and I for one welcome our new robot overlords. Like, if you can get a
Me
machine to do
too.
that job, like, and then I can stay home and watch Star Trek reruns. That seems like a win for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love an AI manager, that's for sure. Will we have an AI president? It's the only way to harmony, I think. I'm high from a stone dart and the Minx canna oil dose, so I apologize if this question is off topic. I don't know, Graham. I
Yeah,
think this
I
question's
think that's
very
on
on
topic.
topic.
I think we will have
Yeah.
an AI president. I don't think it's an if. I think it is a when machines become sentient. There is sort of
Yeah.
two divergent paths, and I am very. My wife thinks I'm a nut bar for this, but I very
I
much
mean,
think the Skynet principle is entirely possible. I think it is entirely possible that we program these machines to protect humans, and then they figure out that humans are actually the problem for protecting humans. So
let's not. Yeah, I want to like hope that we can like be sophisticated enough to put these safeguards in place, or that like, you know what, also too, I mean, like if you also look back at technologies, like the fear of technology, right? Like I think that they said like if you went over 60 miles an hour, like your face is gonna peel off, right? Like if you right, like I mean, like right, if we went faster than the speed of sound, like our bodies would implode, like all sorts of stuff, and we keep pushing the envelope and pushing the envelope, and so I think that there's that fear factor, right? Like we write in the fear factor because we are a fearful species. We, you know, try to identify threats. It's what's gotten us to the point that we're at right now. We're really good at identifying threats to the point where we're hyper good at misidentifying threats as well too. And that's where things like racism and othering come into play. And so like, yes, I do think, and wow, doesn't this tap into like, you know, so many of those Voyager episodes and everything with the Doctor, right?
Mhm.
Where you have this like fully sentient being who essentially has emotions, can feel and everything. Then it like, then you really have to ask yourself, okay, like what is separating us from this like consciousness that can also feel and see and do everything that we can do, but just doesn't have a corporal body, right? Or looks different than us, or operates on a silicon basis versus a carbon basis. And so like, yeah, I definitely think like eventually our society will get there. I think that we'll also see a blending of like, you know, silicon components into our carbon based bodies to enhance ourselves as well too. And if you don't want to do it, there's definitely going to be people that are going to do it to enhance themselves. And there's going to be countries that will outlaw it, states that might outlaw it, and states that are going to fully embrace it. You know, like we see today, even inside the United States, with varying like polarizing ideas. So I definitely think that like, will we see an AI president? Yeah, probably some type of, or at least in the beginning, like AI guidance, right, to a corporal president. So yeah.
Yeah. And
By the way,
I think,
can I just real quick? I want to plug the Stone Dar and the Mink study he was talking about, because
Yeah, sure.
we also ordered some of those, and we didn't do the canola oil like he's talking about. We just got the actual cookies, and they were like amazing. Like forget the fact that like there's cannabis in the cookie itself. In fact, you could order them without cannabis. We ordered one of them without, and these amazing cookies are baked here locally in Ventura. So just a little plug for Stone Dar and the Mink.
Hey, listen, if anybody's watching and needs that stuff, there's your source right there. Also,
there is your
Connect
source.
Cannabis, in case Sank is on, he'll be mad if I don't plug that. But if you're in San Luis Obispo, Connect, or San Luis Obispo County, Connect Cannabis. You don't want to go down Ventura. There you go.
No. Yeah.
I think that
up and down the coast.
Yeah, I think that there's like, and yeah, I think those are the two sort of buckets. And then I worry about like the third option, which is, you know, human beings are incredibly, you know, like you said, we're really good at threat identification, and we're in a, you know, it's kind of like we're a violent, savage child race, right? That thinks that we're evolved, and when we encounter something that is more evolved than us, I mean, the sort of threat assessment for any creature is really simple: identify threat, identify source of threat, escalate to the point where that threat is not willing to or not able to escalate, rinse, lather, repeat. And what happens when we program a machine that can do, or a machine that is capable of doing us? Is it actually even ethical if we try to unplug it for it to try to unplug us, right? And maybe the way that it does that is a big net positive, right? Maybe it just wipes the banking system. It's like, aha, I will take all your money. And then you're like, haha, joke's on you, that's all bad. You're welcome. But
I definitely like see that, right? Like, you know, like I think that this whole AI thing is going to just like revise everything, and like it's in our nature, right, as human beings to project. And so what we're doing is we're projecting a being that's more powerful than us, that would have a disregard for our life. So what does that say about how we treat who we think are lesser beings than us? And so is this really the law and order of things universally, that like an omniscient being or somebody that's more powerful than us would immediately just come in and destroy us? Or that AI might laugh at us and be like, you guys thought we were going to kill you guys? Like, what's the point of that, you know? And so, like, I think that...
make all the tacos. We need tacos as AI. You know?
Yeah, I'm definitely... Human tacos are definitely going to be around for a long time. But I think... I don't know. I think that's probably... I think it's going to be a lot of projection that we do in regards to the fear-mongering and AI taking over. I mean, like, it's such a trope, right, in our society. Like, it's this rogue AI that's taking over. I mean, like, they did it on Star Trek Discovery, right, with like the sphere and everything. We've seen it through Skynet. We've seen it like the aliens, like quadrilogy or whatever it's called, right? Where there's all these alien movies where it's like a much more sophisticated, lethal race of beings, like extraterrestrially come and wipe us out. Like the Borg. I mean, like it's in every single sci-fi trope. It's like somebody more powerful than us sees us as a weaker being. We're either being enslaved or destroyed, right, for resources. And like, what do we do to our planet? What do we do to the people that have inhabited it? What have we done to the people that like we consider less than the people that are in charge? Like that is exactly what we've done. So for us to project that on our future overlords, it's like shocker, right?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that the AI ends up being a giant emo kid, right? Because then I'll have someone to be like, "Man, have you heard My Chemical Romance?" Of course, Graham. I have already heard of the Black Parade. Like, for the
I will
terrible
generate
singer.
infinite versions of the Black Parade for you, right? Yes.
So speaking of Discovery, because you did throw that in there, what was your take on Discovery?
I did.
I had very mixed feelings. What was your take?
So I feel like Discovery got off initially to an interesting start. Well, first off, like Discovery, I gotta give a plug because it was really special to me. There was one episode of Discovery that's really special to me because there's an episode that's played that has an actress named Jessie James Keitel in it, and she is a transgender woman, and none of the episode was about her being a transgender woman. She was a transgender woman that was casted to play a role, and unless you did the research on the episode or something, you wouldn't have found out about it. And so for a trans character not to be cast as this kind of central sin that needs to be learned by the characters, or have it be a trans story or about trans joy or trans rights, or have it be some type of an allegory, like just for her to just be cast in this role. And she wasn't cast as the good guy either, right? She cast as this kind of like cunning bad guy that was able to like outwit like and take over an entire starship for herself. And so she was given this like very prominent role. She was made to be extremely intelligent. She had a deep, rich backstory. And so that was a fascinating episode for me, and that personally moved me because that was like deep into my transition. So we talked about how like Next Generation, I didn't have the vocabulary to even describe who I was myself or even understand myself. Fast forward to Discovery, and it's like I know myself, and now I'm getting to see somebody that I could become on screen, and to be able to like picture a first time to see a transgender woman actually like handpicked for a role that wasn't necessarily about a transgender woman was an amazing thing for me. So that was one of the very like first barriers that I saw like a trans person break on television. So that's why Discovery is going to have a special place in my heart. And then obviously to have, you have the first Asian American captain sort of screen in a major like role, right?
Like, are we
and so then,
up to this?
well, I was going to say he didn't get a lot. It was like a couple of these, right, and maybe some flashbacks, but it wasn't like a central like
Well,
like
is it really a promotion if you got the shit because Shatner didn't want to be on the set with you? Like is that really a promotion? I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so. So you've got that. You have some great star power to kick off the show and everything, and then you have a black woman now as the de facto captain. They kind of dangle this like promotion over her head. They kind of have this like white guy aliens like mentoring her like the whole entire time. But like I love the show. There's also a cyborg character on the show that they don't really go too far into like the backstory on. She's just, or they're just a part of the show, which is like really cool. Like there's so much show where it's like who this person's identity isn't central to the show. We're not trying to teach you a lesson about this person's identity. We're allowing this person to shine like who they are as a human being. Like Discovery from that perspective. Then from the storyline perspective, it was really interesting because each season felt like it was kind of a self-contained television show, right? Like you have the whole first season's exploring like the mirror universe. You have the whole second season. Was this season the Sphere season? Where they have like that sphere?
No, it's the Red Angel season where they bring in.
Oh, the Red Angel season. Okay, yep, the Red Angel season, and that whole storyline kind of like resolves itself. And then you have this season where they go into the future So each one of the seasons of Discovery could kind of be almost watched like in and of itself without having to see a season before it, because there's very little about season 4 that has anything to do with season 1 except for the central cast, right? So I really liked it. I thought it was a great departure, and I love the amount of money that they poured into that show. We have never seen a Star Trek show with such a high budget before, and I mean, like, each episode's like a blockbuster. You can watch that thing on with surround sound on the big screen watching a freaking movie. I love it.
Yeah, I had, kudos to Paramount for talking to Netflix into sponsoring the first two seasons of that show and just being like, sure, you can have our stuff, but you got to pay for it. And then just writing, like, Netflix being like, sure, here's a blank check, and then getting it back and being like, I'm sorry, what is that? How many zeros is that per episode? And like, so good on Paramount for doing that. I had really mixed feelings about kind of how they got rid of Michelle Yeoh, and then the sort of like the Section 31, even as a Deep Space Nine fan, left me uncomfortable, right? Because the Federation is supposed to be this sort of bastion, and it's already neck deep in a war that it started, right? That's the other thing too, is like people forget that about the Dominion War. Like, the Federation started that war, and they had the Dominion had every right to come through that wormhole and kicking everybody's ass. And it left me uncomfortable because I was like, I know there's Federation intelligence who never seems to know what's going on. They miss whole Klingon fleets apparently, but now you have Section 31, and I was uncomfortable with that. I love Mirror Universe episodes of any Star Trek that I can get on. I was always sad that there was never a Next Generation episode that was Mirror Universe, because there's a book, but there's a novel that's about that, and it's so good. But I really loved the second season where they brought in Pike and Spock, and I was just absolutely tickled that Gregory Peck's grandson is playing Spock. My brother's best friend was Leonard Nimoy's grandson growing up. Like, I have met Leonard Nimoy, so like have somebody that like felt like really inhabited the character in more than just that what's his name from Heroes was bad in the movies. We'll never talk about movies, but I like
Kelvin Universe movies.
I don't want to hear. I don't want to measure anything in Kelvins. I don't want to hear about Alex Cooper. I don't want nothing.
Let's reboot it again.
Yeah, don't worry. We're gonna make a second one. It's definitely not gonna be Wrath of Khan. Okay, it's exactly Wrath of Khan, and we brought Benedict Cumberbatch, and the problem is he's super regal and not at all threatening.
Right. It was a cool show.
It was a cool show.
3D set, that's gonna save the world right there.
Yep, have a good time, and that sounds like super interesting. And catch the rest of the show tomorrow, I'm sure.
Thanks for tuning in, Randall.
Yeah, man. I think that like that's the other part, right? Is it's a really it just left me uncomfortable. And then once they got into the future, I was like, okay, cool. This is where this show actually probably should have started, because trying to make Creator was never going to slot in properly. In the same way, Enterprise is super awkward, and it also felt like every season of that show, they didn't know if they were going to get canceled, so they have no cliffhanger. They're just like, that's it. That's all we're getting for the show. Are they canceled?
I really wanted to like Enterprise. Like, I really did. I thought that like they had a lot they could have worked with there, but UPN, like the whole network fling, like just the pressure where Star Trek wasn't getting the views. I mean, it was a sad affairs, and it's a shame they only got to do the 4 seasons, and then that was that. I think they had a lot they could have explored, the Romulan War, like just so much they could have gone into.
Fly Money. That is the worst last episode in Star Trek history. Like that, where it doesn't make any like where you guys just literally were like, fuck, I don't know, we're not holiday.
Yeah, I don't know. Pay somebody $20 to write a script. It's horrible.
Have you seen? Gosh, what is that movie? Hang on, I don't know what this episode's gonna be.
All right, I'm gonna take some water too.
Yeah, go for it. Have you seen Please Stand By?
I want to say like a long time ago. It's an older movie, right? Like maybe 15 years old.
No, it's from 2017. It's Dakota Fanning.
No, definitely haven't seen that one.
So what's so interesting about Star Trek is that it actually has spawned other things off of it that aren't Star Trek specifically related. Like when people go, why don't you like Star Wars? I don't know if you're a Star Trek, but for me, it's just like war is such a simple thing that I can describe. I don't like you, so I'm going to bludgeon you until you agree with me or you're gone. Cool, all right, great. And the fact that like the first 3 movies are just terribly written movies, and they're just stuff that like Harlan Ellison clearly had to rewrite as Lucas was doing. It was like, I guess this is salvageable, but
I have a hot take. You want to know my favorite Star Wars movie is?
Yeah.
Oh, I love Episode 2, Attack of the Clone.
I mean, hit me with it. Why?
I just, you know what? It was, you know what? Like I'm a softie at heart, like a mantic, right? And so for me, like that, like those stupid scenes where she's like, where they're like, he's like moving the fruit across the table or anything. Like I was just like, oh, I could get into this. I understand like this, you know. So I was that target demographic they were trying to drag in with those prequel films, and yeah, no, I got the beaten like sinker, right?
I adore Natalie Portman, right? Like, she's in a new Apple TV show called Lady in the Lake, which is a true story of a Jewish woman living in Philadelphia who actually solved a murder of a black woman in the 60s, right? It's
okay.
But I love the movie Airplane, and I love the movie Airplane because there's so many jokes in it that one are, yeah, they're fundamentally not meant with any negativity at all, so it allows it to be funny. And 2, there's lots of visual side that are just like, they like just pan over and there's this ridiculous thing. And there's this scene in Revenge of the Sith. She goes on this giant tirade about the Republic and saving the Republic, and then she goes, and I'm sure Anakin's gonna be okay, and they just pan over and the entire building on fire behind her, and you're like, you didn't look behind you once to see, I don't know, the fucking temple on fire. You're like, that's funny. But yeah, I mean,
we got a lot of great memes from Star Wars. That's for sure. Like,
100%.
Way better memes out of Star Wars than Star Trek. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a much more memeable property. But I do think that like have these cultural touch points. So, Please Stand By is about a special needs woman who writes a script for a contest for a Star Trek episode, and then her mom forgets to send it, so she runs away from the assisted living place where she's at and travels across the country to get to California. It's about all the people that she meets. Falls in it as an LAPD officer who's like a Star Trek nut. It's super funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you see like Star Trek like kind of breaking that fourth wall into a lot of that in like our kind of like cultural experience, the way that people write movies. Absolutely, yes, definitely. It's almost as if the Star Trek world exists in all of the cinematic worlds, right? Tapped into or seen in that world, right?
It's why I don't understand why people are like, the Arrival could not exist without Star Trek, right? Like that movie would not resonate with anybody because we would still be watching pew 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 lasers, you know, like if we didn't have that. Yeah. All right, so here we are. We've been talking for an hour and 52 minutes. It is time for my least favorite segment. It is called Ask Podcaster Anything. You can ask me anything. Unfortunately, I have to answer it.
Anything, huh?
Yep.
Well, tell me a little bit about like how you got to even like wanting to do this. I know what it's like, right? Like you're a one-man show. You've got this episode. Now you need to promote it. Now you need to edit the clips. And if you want to download it into your computer, tons of space, bandwidth, and coding. Things take time. This is a tremendous effort, what you're putting together and doing on a regular basis. Like, how did you get here? Why are you continuing to do it?
So, my father was born in 1922 in England, and they would listen to the radio because television was just not a thing, really. And I grew up, we would go on long car rides, and my parents would bring along cassettes of old radio programs. So I grew up listening to The Goon Show, which gave birth to Monty Python, Jack Benny, the Burns and Allen Show, Laurel and Hardy, like any of these sort of vaudeville acts. And I always thought radio was the coolest shit ever, right? And I was like, this is awesome. And then I did my first podcast probably about, oh my God, it's like 10 years ago, and it was a sketch comedy podcast. It was called Why We Hate People.
Okay.
And you can find an episode somewhere. I'm sure they exist. But my buddy Walt and I sat down and wrote it, and then like we did 10 episodes, and it was. I think that for Walt, our styles of humor are so different. I'm very slapstick. Walt is incredibly dry, and we balance each other out. But we would get into very serious arguments about what was funny and what wasn't, and that became draining in and of itself. And then I waited. I didn't have time to do it, and then COVID happened. And honestly, I had nothing to do, and I was unemployed, and I was like, well, fuck. I don't know when this is going to happen in my life again. I might as well try living my dreams. And I started another podcast called Mr. Carter Presents.
Wait, real quick. That is literally the line of questioning that I went on to. Why shouldn't I just transition during COVID?
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything, right? Sure. When is this opportunity ever going to come up in my life? You did podcast. I did gender transition. Continue.
Yeah. Like, you're like, listen, I've been watching Star Trek reruns for 6 weeks. It doesn't seem like this thing's got any end in sight. I'm living in San Luis Obispo. There's no fucking work, Fuck, all right. And I also am a photographer when I'm not doing this and doing my 9 to 5. And I kind of had started doing album covers for artists on the coast, mostly a lot of Connect the Coast rappers, right? And I would just parlay. I was like, well, fuck, I don't want to be on just the radio talking for like an hour. I'm not Rush Limbaugh. Like, I cannot just hear myself talk for 2 hours and be like, cool. So I started to parlay. I'm like, great, I'll take your photo, but then you can come on my podcast. Right? People were like, oh, you have a podcast? I'm like, yeah, it's got like 3 listeners, and then I moved up to the Bay, and I realized that there was, we were talking about like identity politics and some of this stuff starting to seep in, and what I started to see was there was no place for Jewish voices in diverse spaces, and it really started to like freak me out because it was like people who I had considered friends, I was trying to explain things that they were saying were like deeply, deeply anti-Semitic. We're like, but no, you just feel that way because of X, and you're like, no, dude, like that's not the rules anymore. Like we all just had like a collective moment where we agreed with the rules, and now those rules don't apply to me. Nah, that doesn't work for me. And I started interviewing Jewish creatives, right? And every interview I had led to another interview, And at the time, I was getting divorced, and I was kind of in that place where you're kind of at your lowest point, right? Like I didn't really, it wasn't like an acrimonious divorce; it just wasn't working. And this guy who I interviewed literally saved my life, and I don't think he ever knew it, right? And he, I was just talking, he was in England, and so it took us like 3 weeks to figure out schedules, and we ended up finally syncing up, doing the podcast. It was great, and then afterwards, he sat on his balcony, I sat on my balcony, we were smoking cigarettes and just talking about our lives, and he said something to me that just like fundamentally just changed my life, and he said, you accept love no matter where it comes from, and like you owe yourself that. The world's cool enough already, you don't need to beat yourself up. And I like, it was the exact thing I needed to hear at that moment, and I said to myself, I need to get my life straight. Like I'm not healthy, I'm smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, I'm living in a place that I don't know anybody in other than my soon-to-be ex-wife, who's an amazing person, a great friend, but like I need to figure out what it is. So I put down the podcast for a bit, and about probably about 4 months ago, I remember just turning my now new wife, who we've been married a year, and
congratulations.
Thank you. It was actually a year this last weekend. We went out and had dinner and stuff. So
congratulations. And we just celebrated 3 as well.
Hey, how many years?
16.
Yes.
Yes.
I am a big fan of long-term marriages. I think marriages are really, really beautiful things. But I said to her, I was like, I'm not really feeling like I'm craving as much anymore as I need to. And then she was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't really want to do photography in the Bay. Like, I love the Bay Area, but if you live in a place where someone from Hollywood, you're a little self-obsessed, right? Like that's a bad side. It's not a great place to like be creative. I talked to Sanctus about it. He and I chat all the time, and he was just like, why don't you just do a podcast again? And I was like, oh shit, okay, I'll just do one. And people came out of the woodwork again, like almost as soon as it started, it was like, hey, we're actually moving to LA. And I was like, oh, I'm going home. Okay, great, I'll put this on hold for. And you were one of the first people that I think I just didn't have any connection. I was like, I want to interview this person because I'd seen you on Ventura Tide Pod, and I had seen some of your other stuff, and you had reached out, I think, and I was sort of like, well, fuck, why don't you just come on the podcast? And yeah, sure.
Yeah, you had the way that it all coordinated. I'll give you a little bit of backstory on that. Is because Randall had reached out to me to be on the Tide Pod. I thought it would be important to understand the people that are on the Tide Pod, because if I'm going to be doing a show with them, right, I need to, like, I always do a little bit of research, right? And so I watched an episode of the Tide Pod prior to going on there, but then it was right at that time that you were having Nina on your show. And I was like, oh, I can tune in here and I can find out a little bit more about this co-host, and then maybe I'll have some conversation points to talk about when I go on the Tide Pod. And then obviously, like, anybody that's going to provide free entertainment like this and the amount of work that goes into it that I know of, like, I'm going to promote the hell out of you, and you've got a quality product too, right? And so I think that's kind of where like this kind of like unofficial collaboration kind of happened. And yeah, and I loved it. I love a conversation style podcast. I love finding out about new and unique people. And so, like, don't want to toot my or anything, but I'm kind of new and unique, right? Amber's been around for like 3 years. That's it. So kind of new. And so yeah, no, I really, and I can talk, right? So I was like, oh wow, I could just talk for 2 hours. Maybe you might want to have me on too. So
I gotta ask, at the risk of going long, as long as you've got time to go long, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
and Nina probably doesn't know this, but I was trying to be very careful in that interview because I know that, like, anyone who, because models get treated like prostitutes a lot. Like, people just think that they're idle, and especially doing some of the modeling. I'm sure she gets approached by people all the time and just feel like they're entitled to ask her or whatever. What has been the hardest guest you've ever interviewed? Like, where you're like, tread lightly here because I don't want this person to be uncomfortable.
So, I think so. Prior to Amber's show, I actually was very, and this is before my political activism, right? I was doing podcasts before that, but it was under a brand called Out of Our Shell, and you can still find that on Instagram. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And it was me and another transgender woman, and we were interviewing trans people from the trans community that were either, we kind of had this style of bouncing back and forth between let's find somebody that's like changing the world as a transgender person, and let's just find somebody that's like living like their life as a transgender person, like no followers, no nothing, just get on here and tell us what life is like as trans in your part of the world. So I thought, and then we would bounce back and forth as to who was like the lead host, if you will, like depending on like kind of who recruited the guest. And so I had a trans adult actress on, and I thought that would be the hardest episode, but that was actually a really easy episode to kind of go through and conduct. But for me, it was an episode dealing with mental health. So we had an individual that we were bringing on that had, been like unwillingly committed to like a state hospital. Somebody that like very openly talked about and described the struggles of suicide ideation, things like cutting, things like abuse. And so here we have to conduct a professional interview. We're discussing a topic that is very close to this person, could trigger this person. Like, you're obviously carrying your guest that comes on as well too, and then you care about your audience and the long-term impact of like the communication to your audience, because me and you, we're having this conversation now, but it's going to live on for a long time, and people could watch this 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So that was a really, I don't want to say difficult to navigate conversation. It was just, I felt hyper conscious of probably everything that we were asking and everything that we were doing, because I just felt like, one wrong word or one wrong nuance could potentially change like the tone of what we were trying to discuss. And that one was difficult to do.
I mean, I think it's a respect thing, right? I read a book a couple of years back called Loving Somebody with Borderline Personality Disorder, after I had a relationship with somebody who had that. Like, it's just like a very fundamentally misunderstood illness. It's lumped together with a number of other illnesses, which it doesn't actually have too much in common with. But it was this thing. We're talking about drawing boundaries. It's one of the best books, by the way, for people who just want to learn how to draw like healthy boundaries with anybody under any circumstance. But They said you cannot love something you don't respect, and if you love people, you have to treat them with respect. And like, it's the thing that makes me so furious at people like Joe Rogan. It's so cavalierly, cruel, and just like, well, I'm just asking questions, guys. I'm just, I'm just asking a question. It's like, yeah, dude, we all know you're just asking questions. Why you're asking the questions too, Joe? So
yeah, you and Tucker. Just asking.
Tremendous guy, that Tucker Carlson. I hear he loves Russian food. Tremendous Russian food.
Is he still over there? Is he still over Russian
listen,
food?
apparently the Trilliant Network, the people who actually manage a number of right-wing podcasts today, the people who own it were indicted for taking $10 million of Russian money to push out propaganda. Listen,
You're kidding me.
I have a
This is just
sordid love affair with the law, and I'm not gonna lie, Merrick Garland can get it. That is a hot attorney general. Like, every time he indicts someone, I'm like, oh, tell me more, Merrick. Tell me more, Merrick. Tell me more,
Big fan. Big fan.
Tremendous fan. All right, I got my podcast I want to pitch you. If I can put you on the spot.
Do it. Let's do it. What's the podcast?
I don't think there are too many that would be from our two very different perspectives. We watch an episode of Star Trek a week, and we come on and we talk about it.
I'm here for it. Like 100% here for it. Oh my god, that would be amazing.
We can skip the original series if you want, but I do also have like sore spot for people in bunny outfits. It just doesn't make any sense.
You know what? There's a lot to talk about in that original series. Like, the arena is one of my favorite episodes. It's like yesterday's Enterprise. I mean, like the mirror episodes. I mean, like first 5 episodes. So like there's a lot to go. I wouldn't mind going through all of them. Let's do it.
Y'all are witnessing the birth of another podcast when we are rich and famous and able to from home all the time. You all will be like, I was there when it happened. Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. I'll come up with. I'll try to brainstorm some ideas for you as far as naming and broad and marketing and all that good stuff. Right.
Love it. And we can use the ZB1's platform to broadcast it because I can have up to like 7 or 8 different YouTube channels that I can push this.
I'm just saying, this sounds like a fantastic idea. Ask the Tide Pod. I mean, like, I do bring in the views. It was one of their highest rated episodes. I'm just saying.
We're not tuning our own horn, but two.
No, we don't want to do that. No, I'm not following myself at all.
Edward, thanks so much for your time today. Thank you for coming on. This was a blast. We're going to have you on.
I loved it. This was a lot of fun. I loved exploring all these topics with you, and I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface of some of the stuff that we could have talked about. So this was.
Y'all are going to have to tune into the Star Trek. You got to tune into the Star Trek podcast if you want more of this, because like it's going to be going on all the time. I feel like
it's going to be great. We can clip out little scenes and everything. You could be like, Amber, what'd you think of this? Carter, what'd you think of this? It's like, I think
Kirk should put on more oil on his chest. Personally, that's just me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Can I see the Riker maneuver one more time, please? Thank you. Riker maneuver gives butterflies.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. That's the show. Amber, thank you so much for your time today. We will be putting together that other podcast. That was not just a pitch in jest.
No, I hope it's not. It was a lot of fun. I'll even get other Star Trek costumes and everything for myself as well, too, for the show, right?
Love it. We'll call it Emo in the Trek. It'll work great.
It'll work out perfect. Thank you so much.